Hello, and welcome back to the ministry. And we're continuing where we left off. We're on about part 7 of this. And yeah, I'm looking at my note. And as we were before, we were talking about the spirit of lust and perversion. I was coming into the point where I was making the point about the spirit of perversion. That there's a level of perversion also that comes in when a person is under witchcraft and that's that intense desire. Look at what happened with Anan. They were sick. He was sick with desire, wanting his own sister. This woman is sick with desire, wanting a man that is not her husband. Okay? So it's a level of sickness that is up here. It's not that physical sickness. It's that I want this person. I desire this person. It's similar, but not the same to the way that our spouses may have been feeling towards us, because God has turned their hearts towards us and they're dealing with the desire of wanting us. But the differentiation is the fact that their want isn't an unhealthy want. Their want is a removal of toxicity of their own life as they're being transitioned into a healthier relationship, one with God. Then we come in the picture. Okay? But the spirit of lust is being detoxed from them. That's the differentiation. But this woman in this story, she's dealing with a level of lust and perversion which is as unto witchcraft. Look at the way that this guy came at her. Look at the things that he made her do. Remember, I told you that he had her speak out her mouth that she wanted him. That was a word curse. Then sexually, whatever it was they did when they were intimate, created a physical covenant between the two of them that created sexual lust and perversion. Because anytime you are so lustful for a person, now, like I said, for your spouses, that's a positive thing, because it's allotting them the ability to release the things in their lives that are not serving of God. And God is pretty much almost dangling us, in front of our spouses and saying, look, this is your spouse. This is what you want. If you want this, release this. So they are being almost forced to release the perverseness of their life in order to come into agreement and alignment with the things that are godly, that God is trying to bring them back into. Okay? But the operation that is the opposite is the operation of the perversity of unnaturally desiring a individual due to some sort of sexual covenant to that person. Our God ordained spouses, if you ain't met the person, that's not a sexual covenant. That's a spiritual covenant, okay? God has bound you and your spouse together spiritually. What God puts together, let no man put asunder. God did that. But the way that this man did her, he operated under witchcraft. I remember years ago somebody taught about the fact that a person can create witchcraft by looking at you. If you look up at a person operating under witchcraft, they will look into your eyes and speak something. Matter of fact, I remember years ago when I was watching an episode of my old show, and I resaw this episode, I'll say within the last year. And the woman, her whole action for when she took people out is she would have the men look directly, or whoever her victim was, she would point to her eyes to make them focus on her eyes. Once they focused on her eyes, she would tell them what she wanted. Notice how this woman was told by Harley exactly what to say. He said, "Say it out your mouth that you want me." That was a form of verbal witchcraft, okay? 2, he was, what's the word I'm looking for? He was operating in a spirit of, 1, seduction, 2, it's almost like what he said to her drew her in. Notice that. That's what he was trying to do. So he was using witchcraft by bringing her into him. Notice she didn't just straightly fall for him. She wasn't just, oh, this guy is... She resisted him pretty resoundingly in the early part. But the problem was she wasn't getting anything to resist him with from her spouse. Meaning her spouse was not giving her the spiritual protection in which she needed to keep her from going over in that direction. He wasn't even thinking about it. Which also could be witchcraft, because it can be a person operating in apathy. We already talked about apathy. Apathy is you just don't care. And sometimes what the enemy will do is he'll bring a level of witchcraft where it will block. Hello, y'all. We out here praying for our husbands, and we trying to get the spiritual block out the way. I was listening to somebody in the past few days, probably my coach, and they were talking about the fact of having that block up. You get to a point that a blockade is created. So it's almost like, perfect example, you are married. This is the whole point that we're talking about this. You come into your marriage and you start to realize in certain seasons, you're recycling that same feeling that you felt when you weren't with this person, but now you're with them and they're still ignoring you. Operating in a spirit of apathy, which can also be a level of witchcraft. Remember, I told you splitting spells. People will commit a level of splitting spells where they're trying to get they do the split, but then put a love spell directly behind that. That's technically what he did. He did a splitting between her and her spouse, but due to the spouse's unawareness, and which can also be a form of witchcraft, because if the person is targeting you, they may target your spouse by trying to get them not to pay attention, thereby making the split successful, because there's a spiritual door shut between you and your spouse. You see how that's working? So, and what would have prevented this? Prayer. She and her husband did not have a strong prayer life. You can see that all over this. Matter of factly, they made the mother a villain for constantly coming back and saying, hey, y'all should be praying. Hey, y'all should, hey. But if they were praying in their household, none of that would happen. I remember watching a video from, what's her name? Heather Lindsay and her husband. And they made a point of saying in their book that you need to be in a relationship when you're with your spouse that you are operating in the strength of fighting with your spouse, not fighting your spouse. Meaning you and your spouse need to be in one accord at all times. Meaning they have to be willing to stand at your side. They have to be willing to come into the recognition of the things in which you recognize, so that the two of you can communicate and fight these battles together. Because yeah, they're going to be spiritual battles. Don't think that there won't be, but you still got to pray for good communication between you and your spouse. There's a level of decrees that I got. It talks about there will be no arguments between me and my spouse. Because see, what the enemy will do is try to bring in arguments. Arguments is an open door for the enemy to bring wedges between the two of you, thereby causing a separation and a pushback. It pushes you away from your spouse, and then in some ways it pushes, if you are the connection for your spouse to God, then it pushes them away from God too. You should not be the only connection to God. They should have a prayer life and all of this. But it's like you're looking at something and it's going from a small space to a large space. You understand what I'm saying? Between the three-string cord, not that easily broken, right? So, with that being said, the wife and her desires, she's now hooked back up with Harley. But Harley and her end up discussing again her starting her own marriage counseling business. Number one, can we just address the fact that if you up in all this kind of mess, do you really think it's a good idea for you to be the one? You to be the one trying to start a marriage counseling business, and look at what you done did to your entire life. Let's just take that moment right there, if we gonna have a moment. But let me tell you something about, let's just address that too. The enemy knows what you're called to do. What you think he gonna do? He gonna come right for that thing. She called to being a marriage counselor. What comes under attack? Your marriage. Duh. For those of y'all that are called to speak on marriage, understand. The enemy ain't playing with your relationship. He coming for that. Because if he can, as soon as y'all get together, y'all might get the season of peace. But remember, the enemy always gets the opportunity to come in the second season. So y'all gonna get adjustments. So I suggest that while you're in the season of peace, you and your spouse get on the same accord. For when the season of the door opens for the confusion to come back. So that you teach him how he can see it when it's coming. So once he knows it, there you go. He'll be able to see and discern and see it from a mile away. Because it's the one thing the enemy does not want your spouse to do, is to be able to discern these things coming towards them, okay? 2, the enemy came for her because of the fact that she called to it. Hello, y'all. Anybody ever notice that the thing you're very well called to is the very thing that ends up under attack? Look at it. Understand it. That's what you're dealing with in this situation. All right? So, with this, she was begging to get this new marriage counseling business, and Harley starts helping her do the development phase of what it would look like for her to do it by herself, like an actual business corporate scenario. Let me tell you something. And it's funny because my coach talked about something similar to this the other day. She was referring to the scripture of the ram in the bush. Abraham taking Isaac up the mountain in order to slay him or kill him, because that's what the Lord was saying. God will take the very thing that you're called to do and have you put it on the altar for sacrifice. In this case, this woman was putting her entire life's work on the altar to be sacrificed. The problem is she did it, meaning she sacrificed it. In all this stuff she done did up until this point, sacrifices her calling. It taints her calling and taints her testimony of her marriage. But she wasn't that sold out to God anyway. As you watch her, her mother had to pull her and say to her, this boy gonna hurt you something bad. And you can see him hurting her. But she's under witchcraft. She under witchcraft. She can't see the forest for the trees. I've seen people under the influence of witchcraft. If you ever see a person under witchcraft, they will literally look at their the person that is attempting the witchcraft on them. They'll look at them and they'll look like they're under a spell. Let's take a moment and talk about the movie Little Mermaid, okay? In The Little Mermaid, what did Ursula do? Ursula took Ariel's voice, yes? But then she went to Eric, and once she got to Eric, she started to do something to him that messed with his ability to discern. You saw him fall under a spell. You saw that weird out of it expression that he had. He went into a people under witchcraft actually look like that. They either look like that or look like they're under love potion under number 9 type thing, where they've been hit with the love stick, and you've been sitting up there like, what the hell happened to you? Now, in regular society, a lot of people be like, oh, did you get something? Because you look way too happy. What's going on with you? But these people look like they're impacted by a level of because I watch somebody, anytime the other person talked, meaning the one that was putting the spell on them, they would not speak until that person spoke to them. They would not do. It was obvious. It was so obvious. It was ridiculous. I've seen it several times. And that's a love spell. Okay? So, can you hold that against a person if they don't realize they're under a spell? So, with that being said, elevation comes from God. She was trying to circumvent the process. This is my warning to y'all. Because of the fact that God has anointed you with the gift to do something in your life, the enemy is going to come and bring in distractions in order to get you to bite the bait. How many times we done said that in this broadcast? Don't bite the bait. All right? The whole thing is a bait. That person was bait. Well, how did all of this open up? Because she was desiring something different. God will always give you what you need in the season you're supposed to have it, right? God starts you off in that small seedling form, meaning you're not going to have the massive company. But see, this chick was sitting up there working in a matchmaker company and seeing how big and gorgeous and glamorous and amazing that this building looked and how the boss operated and all this stuff. And she's sitting up there like, I can do that. So I wish I had my own practice. So she got Harley up here trying to build her own practice for her. And she thinking, oh, Harley gonna build me something that look just like that. They done went and looked at spaces. They done looked at venues. They done all this kind of stuff. Elevation comes from God. Anytime you are trying to circumvent the process, one, you're missing something. Meaning, there's something God was trying to teach you because you trying to sit up there and go the narrow path. Go in this direction because it looks like the better direction. God's trying to say, I need you to take your little behind and go through the wilderness because you got levels to elevate. And in order to have the character to stay where I'm trying to put you, I need you to sit up there and go through this side, which looks like the side that looks like is unassuming. It looks like I don't want to be there. It looks like I gotta wait and rank up slowly, where I'm gonna have this practice in a couple years and not tomorrow. But nah, this whole thing started because she wanted her own thing. Harley didn't even show up until after she told her husband she wanted her own practice. See how the devil do? See how the devil do? Harley didn't even show up until after she had the desire. The enemy will bring you an opportunity to create an open door so that if you bite the bait, yeah, you're going to get what you want, but you didn't get it the way God wanted. Because you stepped out from under your covering. She stepped away from her husband. She stepped away from the route in which the Lord was taking her, the slow route. Yeah, she had to work as a therapist in somebody else's matchmaking company. She hated the woman, all this kind of stuff. But nah, she's sitting up there like, I'm going to go circumvent around this. I done got this guy now, which two, you had to step out on your marriage, which thereby ruins your witness. Because you're trying to be a marriage counselor, and look what happened to your daggone marriage. Look at what happened to your marriage. And you are sitting up here trying to call yourself being a marriage counselor. This, yes, it can be an example. But you understand what I'm saying. You want to be an example for positive counseling to your clients. Do you really want to be the example for being negative? This is what literally is happening to this woman. Remember, at the beginning of the film, she's telling from all of this already have happened. Meaning she got the practice, but now this is her testimony for the reason why it took so long. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. But look at what she's doing. It never pays to rush the process. Harley literally was a demonic plant that as soon as she said, I want to be a marriage counselor, her husband did not. It's not that he didn't agree. He said, not right now. How many times has God told us not right now? How many times has God told us not right now? I know you want this, but not right now. How many of us have been sitting in this season waiting on our spouses and God's like, not yet? And you're like, but God, but God, but God, but God, but God. Not yet. But God, not yet. But God. How many times have I said to y'all, the reason that some of our relationships have not come to pass is because of the fact our God ordained spouse is also going through something. Matter of factly, the more we are obedient to God, the more the enemy sends attack to him. Because guess what? If your God ordained spouse is still operating in the prodigal state, the enemy's like, oh, I'm going to throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at him. Because guess what? He's not as obedient as she is. And she watching me, but he ain't. This is why we are shields to our husbands in the spirit. Because some of them just ain't spiritually aware enough to what's going on around them. And it almost creates more warfare for them because of the fact that they aren't aware. That's why God has us as spiritually alerted as he does, so that we'll stand in the gap and pray. The problem in the fact of is that your God ordained spouse may not understand how to keep the doors shut yet. We know to keep praying that when we see a problem, let me pray and shut it. Your God ordained spouse, he might get out the problem and he's just sitting there like, I just got out the problem. I'm good. I'm good. And the enemy's like, hell no. Send him another problem, please. And we got to spiritually be able to understand, that's another problem. Now, did I finish with the part and not that easily broken? The wife was dealing with apathy for her spouse when it came down to, or from her spouse when it came down to the situation for the husband in Not That Easily Broken. Meaning his concentration was on somebody else. It wasn't the fact that he was really physically interested in the other person, but the enemy will do that. He'll draw a man's attention because he knows that person is a kind person, that they will, and some of your husbands have been dealing with that. They want us to be the savior of the situation because the enemy understands the type of person. You think the enemy don't study you? He study you, he study him. Stop playing. He will use that person's kindness for weakness. He will watch that person through monitoring spirits, monitor the way that they operate, and then send them exactly what they'll fall for. It's only because we are highly discerning that we don't fall for it. And I'm going to take this time right now to talk about somebody that did. It's a young woman that I follow. I don't really follow her directly, but I took a break from her. She's a business person, but also is a young Christian that's trying to start her ministry. See how this relates? This woman's trying to start her ministry. She's operating in an element where things are slowly creeping in order for her to begin her ministry. She's been walking through the process for the past 7 or 8 years. And I'm going to give you her name. Her name is, what is it? Oh, I didn't think of that person. Oh my God, I can't think of her name off the top of my head. Hold on. What is her name? I guess Lord doesn't want me to say it because I can't think of it right now. I'm seeing her, but I cannot think of her name. If I'm supposed to say it, I'll say it later. But the young woman, she does a testimony of having slipped. She slipped. And when she slipped, she openly came on to her platform and said, because she's in ministry, she said, I'm going to come forth before you guys and I'm going to tell y'all I slipped. And she explains the process of which she went through. She doesn't go into deep detail, but she talked about how she was longing for relationship and she decided to go out on dates. This is why I keep warning y'all. Don't be out here trying to be going out on dates if God didn't tell you to go out on dates. If God did not instruct you to be out here dating people, don't open yourself up to that kind of warfare. Look at what happened to this woman in this movie. She got caught up with somebody, and when did that start? It started as the guy just having interest in her. Some of y'all will get caught up by witchcraft due to the fact that the person has a nice smile, looks nice, and they have an interest in what you do. This is all that happened with this woman that caused her to slip up. And I'm not talking about the woman whose story I'm telling. I'm talking about the woman in the movie. See how almost identical that is? You running around here trying to find somebody that's interested in you because you tired of waiting on your daggone spouse is going to run you into problems, because this is something you need to pay attention to. I have no judgment for the woman that slipped. She slipped because she made a decision. God gives us free will all day long. We got free will. The woman in this movie, she had 15 chances to stop that thing and nip it in the bud. She chose none of them. None of them. Okay? The minister that decided to do what she did, she ended up in a situation where she had to turn around and testify of the thing that she did. It's a warning. This whole thing is a warning to y'all. Do you not understand that? This is a warning of what can happen when you sit up here and move out of God's will and God's order. Because the enemy gonna sit there like a serpent waiting to give you an apple. Waiting to bait you. Waiting to do something in order to get you to come out of agreement with what it was that God needed you to do. Waiting. And here you go, giving into it. But that's what happened to Eve. Is it not? Eve bit the apple. This is a warning not only for y'all before marriage. This is a warning for that moment in marriage, which is going to may pop up a couple of times in marriage, where you're going to have those moments. Hey, my husband ain't paying me enough attention right now. And the enemy will roll an apple in front of your face and be like, you willing to bite? You willing to bite? This man did not pursue her like that. He put himself in front of her, but kept putting scenarios that gave her the option to make the decision to come closer to him. Do you understand that? She chose to step closer. When